Good evening and welcome back. Week
What's
4.
going on?
We are here. We are almost halfway home.
And you came back. I guess you prayed.
Nothing better to do.
Nothing.
Well, we are, I mean, literally, we are, as we look at this, we're going all the way up to day 19. I mean, we're almost halfway. I don't want to say through because we don't want it to be through. We want it to be a good jumping off point, but we are almost halfway. That's incredible.
Halfway to Easter.
Halfway
That's
to
it.
Easter.
Whoop, whoop.
Halfway to resurrection. Here we go. Well, if you've been following along, we are right in the middle of our 40 days of consecration, and we have been doing devotionals every single day over these last 3 or 4 weeks. And so what we do now on Wednesday nights is we look at those and we highlight the week that was, and we want to bring to you insights, thoughts, and just a conversation about what it is that we are seeing in the same way of what it is that you've already seen. So what we do want to continue to remind you to do, that it is not too late to get involved.
Never too
not
late.
too late, never
Yeah.
too late, always room. So make sure you're following us on all of our social media platforms, but also you can text the word 40 days, that's 40 DAYS, no space, and to our text number 475-255-7744. You do that, and every day, Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m., you will get alerted with a text message that will give you access to the video so that you too can be part of this discussion, but even bigger, the devotional that we're doing as a church. So, that being said, let's get into it.
Yeah.
Right? So we are week 4. We are going to start with day 15, and day 15's title was shame. So Pastor Mike, if you wouldn't mind reading it for us.
So we are reading in Matthew chapter 26, and we're going to start in verse 69. Now Peter was sitting out in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him. "You were with Jesus of Galilee," she said. But he denied it before them. "I do not know what you're talking about," he said. Then he went out to the gateway, where another girl saw him and said to the people there, "This fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth." He denied it again with an oath, "I don't know the man." After a while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you are one of them, for your accent gives you away." Then he began to call down curses on himself, and he swore to them, "I don't know the man." Immediately a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken, "Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times." And he went outside and he wept bitterly.
You know, we ask at the end of every devotional, we ask you to ask yourself a question, and that question would be, how do I think about myself after I have clearly sinned? So as we do with all of these, we start just with observations, thoughts, things that jumped out. What do we got?
The walk of shame.
Oh.
After you have sinned, how do you feel? The walk of shame, shame, shame. I mean, it is the few of the words that, jump out is just the servant girl,
Yeah.
right? Or 2 servant girls, and
Yep.
you're denying who Jesus is. Of the little girl. It's understandable if it was a bunch of Roman soldiers or they were a group of hostile Jewish men, but a little servant girl, probably inquiring because, hey, I had a good interaction with Jesus. He said the kids can I come to you also? And he was like, never knew him. And then the second time denying with
an oath.
With an oath.
I swear on my grandmother's grave.
Yeah, it's like
I swear on the
oath is a no. It's different than a passing thing. He declared and spoke something, and in this culture, more than we can even comprehend sometimes, the power of word. The power of the word, the power of your word, the power of God speaking and it becoming creation from the power of the Word of God read and was just so holy, and scrolls in the tabernacles, to the word of a man.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's all you have. And here is Peter standing on his word, declaring an oath.
Yeah.
And then the third time he just bitterly weeps
Yeah.
because he knows that he just put an oath. He didn't just deny. No, I don't know. I don't go to Kingdom Life. No, I don't do that Jesus thing. No. It's like, no. You know. So those are the things that immediately jump out to me, that is when I hear and continually hear this story, you know, of just how much he must have been scared and frightened, and just his world just falling apart. Didn't know if he was going to make it through the night. Were they going to arrest? Were they going to send out another, you know, group of soldiers in the middle of the night trying to round up the disciples and throw them in jail? And was his life going to be over? Just everything falling apart, trying to understand what Jesus just said from the Last Supper to the garden. What is this all about? And he's just completely lost, to where he's finishes up bitterly weeping, which to me just shows a man that is broken, lost, and doubting everything.
Yeah.
But haven't we all been there?
Yeah. Well, I think the interesting thing, there's so many things that jump out to me, but one of the things when you highlighted, when he says he calls out an oath, and it brings me back to, and I wonder how much Peter remembered this when Jesus is at the Sermon on the Mount. And he says to him, you've heard it says, don't make an oath, don't swear by heaven, don't swear by, because you can't change anything. Don't even swear by the color of your hair, because you can't make it white or gray. Of course, back then they probably didn't know how to dye hair. But he says, simply let your yes be yes and your no be no, for anything beyond this comes from the evil one. Wow. And so there was something about the recognition, like you said, that your word had weight. Your word, it was more than, we don't understand that, because we make and break our promises so easily. But in that culture, if you were known to be a person who broke your promises, you were not even welcomed in the community, because you couldn't be trusted.
Yeah.
Right.
And so by doing this, there's so many things that happen. There's number one, I imagine Peter recognizing that number one, here I said, Jesus, I'm going to go to prison with you. Even if I go to prison, or even if I die, I'm your guy. And all this, and Jesus goes, no, Peter, you're going to deny me. I'll do whatever. And now a little girl, just like you said, and it's interesting. It says a little girl comes up to him. It doesn't even say she's accusing him of anything. She goes, "Weren't you with him?" Yeah. And his automatic reaction is no. So there's this distancing himself from his friend. So there's that. Then there's probably the recognition of Jesus having said that, in recognizing that if I break my word, if I'm calling down oaths on myself and I break them, everything else is evil. So remembering Jesus' words about oaths, and now that he's putting himself that much further out of not just relationship with Jesus, but with community. So everything, it's his own value, who he is, his own identity is being stripped away by his sin. He's losing all sense of who he is by what he's done.
You know, and I admit that I just saw this, so I didn't study it. It might be a fun thing to study. It may be, maybe Pastor Mike, you've seen it, Pastor Mark, or yourself. Again, I can't get over the fact that details in the Bible are so important, right? It's a big book, I get that, but in the context of humanity, it's just a few pages. The idea that the author would make it that each person referenced where they knew Jesus from. So you see the trajectory of ministry. What did Jesus do while he was in Galilee? What did Jesus do that he was from Nazareth? Why is it those moments that they tie back? What did they see the best of Peter in those moments, like you said? Mm-hmm. Did they see? When I look at this and I think backwards, if I think that it ends with him weeping bitterly, and I think of the brokenness, I think first of all, let's remember, Peter is at least in the vicinity. Yeah. He may have ran, but he's working his way back, right?
And sticking close.
That's it, right? He's still in the middle of the action. But I know myself. We talk in the house about, we don't use certain language. We don't want to use certain words because they're mean or they don't bring, there's better ways of using words. And I can think about, being frustrated and saying that, that was something that was stupid, right? And all of a sudden Lydia goes, ooh, what did you say?
Good old Lydia.
Daddy, I thought we don't use those words. And I'm like, little girl, listen, you don't know the context. And okay, you're right. And now let me say, and now my daughter's correcting me. How dumb can I be? Ooh, did you do it again, Daddy? Daddy, is that another word that we don't use? And I think what happens is we get so sensitive when we recognize that we've been caught. Now, we don't know that we've not been caught for the whole picture, but just we get a check and we go, oh man, they must know. And they don't just know that I was with him, but they now know that I'm not with him. Now they think that I'm a coward. Now they think that I'm this. Should I even, whatever? And then I think the one that really sets it apart for me is that they go from, I saw you with Jesus, but your accent gives you away. And I remember hearing one pastor, and I know I'm putting things into it, but I remember a pastor saying, when you go to a different country, if you go to a foreign country, and you go, or we'll reverse it. If you have the embassy of Ecuador here in the United States, the people in the embassy are not going to speak English without an accent because they're first from Ecuador. So you know where they're from because of their accent. And so I remember the preacher challenging us, what is the accent on our life? When we live, when we love, is there an accent of heaven? Can you hear the language of heaven? And so it goes from I've seen you to I haven't even seen you, but I know that you still talk like you're with him. You still have a certain thing that about you that I know you're running from, but I see it. And even then, I almost feel like what ends up breaking him, yes, it's the rooster and the reminder, but at this point, he's not denying that I wasn't there. He's denying that I am that person, that I was ever that close to begin with. And so I just look at this and I think, man, wow. Because like you said, what if the thought is, are they coming for me? Are they whatever? We don't know much about the family history of the other disciples, but we know Peter had a family.
Yep.
We know he had a mother-in-law. We know he had a wife. It's not just as simple as, oh, well, Jesus will take it. What if they come after my wife? What about my mother-in-law? Who's going? My brother. What's going to happen? And there's so much in this where I think sometimes we can read it in hindsight thinking, well, if I was Peter, I wouldn't have done that. Well, that's what Peter said before it happened.
Yeah, exactly.
And I do love that last week we were talking about how they ran away. And he is close. I mean, there's another gospel where when the rooster crows and he looks and Jesus looks at him
Right.
through the cell, through the whatever, if it's a little cell window, but he was close enough that he followed Jesus through and to the Sanhedrin, to them getting thrown in jail, and then Jesus, he makes eye contact with Jesus at the lowest moments.
Jesus,
sees him. And there's Jesus, and just they make eye contact, and it's like, man. So, but to me, I'm looking at it right in this moment, like, but he was close. He knew who he was. He did know where his accent came from. He does know who he's called to be. It's just scary. To where, hey, let me get past this night. Let me get my footing. Let the sun come out. Let me get on my footing on some strong ground, because right now everything, it's like I'm falling off a cliff. And that's where we relate. That's where we have those moments. And I'm not talking about, it's just uncertainty of who we are. What's tomorrow? What does my family look like? What's my purpose? Sometimes we can be the most successful people and have the money and have the things, but we're still more lost than ever before. And so I see that this is something that we are easily can relate to in saying, man, God, I need to be closer. I need to know who I am with you, but right now there's just so much uncertainty. It's hard. So I relate to Peter in this. It's hard, you know.
I think then the question becomes is, now we don't have the thoughts of Peter, right? We have his actions and we can kind of put in our own thoughts. But I guess the question is, how do we, when we are close, so we know we want to, but our mind doesn't let us for whatever the reason. There's that self-talk. There's that, there's that idea that, the voice that you hear over and most often is yours. It's your thoughts. It's your experiences, right? In this moment, I don't think Peter is thinking about, man, remember that time I walked on water? How cool was that? I think in this moment he's thinking, I can't get it right. I try to protect him, and he doesn't want me to protect him. And now I'm here, and I don't even know what I'm doing here because I ran, and now I'm here, and what am I supposed to do, and where am I supposed to go? And you know what? I might as well just go back to fishing because this is just ridiculous, and it was easier, but was it more beneficial before? I guess my question is, what is it that we can do? What would be a strategy for us to begin to help ourselves navigate when we have these moments? Pastor Marco just mentioned, this is natural. This isn't just a break. He's not having a psychotic episode. He's dealing with life. There is doubt. There's uncertainty, all these things you mentioned. So what would be the narrative that we can remind or begin to even train ourselves, especially now in this season, with coming through 20 days of maybe discipline, or maybe where you are right now is you realize that, you know what, these first 20 days have been hit and miss and nobody really knows about it, and you haven't really talked to anybody, and you're feeling like, I'll just tune in because that's the easiest thing I can do, but I keep trying to give this thing up and it keeps taking me back, and I just don't want to be, and what I'm telling you is, okay, but let's listen in, and how do we change the narrative?
That's such a fantastic example, right? Because breaking the fast, whatever, the temptation, giving into the temptation. If we go back and Jesus says, hey, watch and pray that you would not give into temptation, right? What he's not saying is, if you do give into temptation, you're done. He still says, watch and pray that you not give into temptation. Now, we have the benefit of reading the story, knowing what's going on, and knowing the outcome, knowing the lesson to be learned. They didn't know. They were kind of in it, and it was living. But because we have this ability to look into it and look back and see what Jesus is saying, this is where we get our hope, right? This is where our hope comes from. Because what we find with Peter is, in the moment, I love the point that you point out, that he stays close. He doesn't know. He doesn't know how to fix anything here, but there's something in him that longs to try to fix it. He just doesn't know how. But what would make him stay close is relationship.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't stay close because of his own gain. There was literally nothing for him to gain personally. It was a danger. It was a danger for him in that they could recognize him not only as being with Jesus, being the one who cut off Malchus's ear.
That's a great point.
There was the danger of looking at Jesus and, is Jesus going to reject me? Right? Yeah. But in spite of it all, there's something inside of him that still keeps him close. Yeah. And so we have the ability to look in and say, what is it? And it goes back to what we talked about in the very first week. The difference between Judas and the disciples was relationship. Something about him. He needed to stay close because he needed the forgiveness of Jesus even as much as he wanted to hide from him. And so the hope for us is this, when we look at this, is recognizing in the end of the story that all it was is repentance. All it was is saying, God, I've sinned. I've sinned, and I can't fix it, but I trust my relationship with you that you will forgive me. And this, we look at this and we go, well, this was huge. But sometimes it's the littlest sins that trip us up. Yeah. How many people right now, if you've watched and there's been a moment in your fast time where you have tripped, and so you just gave up. Maybe it was once or twice, and so you just stopped because, well, I just can't do this anymore. But yet, just like Minister Lee said, here you are watching. The fact that you're still watching says that there's something in you that knows that there's a truth, and you're staying close to it. And so the answer for this was really found when Jesus, when the disciples came to Jesus, remember? And they said to him, Jesus, they say that the law says that, I'm supposed to forgive my brother 7 times. What do you say? And Jesus says 77 times 7.
Yeah.
It's infinitive. You never stop. Well, if he tells us that we're to forgive to infinity, then how much more does Jesus do that?
Yeah.
That's a Peter question.
And that's a Peter question.
And what I love is just the fact of how do we deal with shame, right? That's what. How do we deal? And we're getting to guilt, but how do we deal with the effects of sin, right? Or the effects of disobedience, the effects of messing up, for the effects of failing, and doing things, and all the wrong way, and talk about it. Start there. That's what relationship is. Talk about it.
Yeah.
What is prayer? Talking to God. We talk to God about it. When you go to a counselor, a pastor, a therapist, what do? You talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? How about some of the biggest problems and biggest things in your life, if you would just talk to your spouse, just talk to your kids, just be honest and real in those. If relationships are powerful, then be honest enough to have those hard conversations and watch what will happen. Because it's amazing, because that right there is where we meet grace, where we meet forgiveness, where we meet encouragement, where we get the strength, where 2 or more gather, because it's so, that's where we get the comfort. I cannot be comforted if I never talk to anybody.
Yeah.
If I hide my shame, the Holy Spirit can't wrap the comforter around that, because I don't bring it to God to allow that to happen. I don't bring it to my wife to allow that to happen. I don't bring that to my dear friends because I don't allow it to happen. But once I do bring it to you, and I'm like, hey guys, man, I'm struggling with this.
Yeah.
And I'm having a hard time. It's amazing what then happens. And of course, then that's where you need those people in your life that are the godly people who want, like, man, what?
How could you?
Yeah.
Right.
And it's amazing how many times the lies, like, oh, but if I share that, what will they think about me?
Talk about that.
Yeah. If I say that, what are they gonna think about me? Right? Can you imagine? It's like, how did Peter end up telling the other apostles that what Jesus said he was going to do, he actually did? Right. And was that the key, though? Was that the moment that he broke through and realized there's hope for me?
Who's the story written by?
Yeah.
Matthew, Mark,
Yeah.
Luke, and John. Not Peter.
Correct.
So how did they know it?
Yeah.
Right.
The only way is
he didn't write it in the few letters he wrote, so
He
they're
didn't.
not there. So he didn't write it there. But whether it was in that upper room
Yeah.
or it happened before that, whenever, he actually said, guys, you're never going to believe this,
But here's what happened.
but I'm broken because this is what happened. And then they began to speak. Because how many other stories that are not documented of what happened to the others?
Right.
When they ran. And I can say, like, you were where? You were right outside the compound? Where all the soldiers and the people in the mob was? Why would you be there in the first place? It's Jesus, man. I couldn't completely run away. So for us, how do we deal with this shame? We got to talk to God, and we got to talk to one another.
But the beautiful thing is James 5:16, right? If we talk about shame, what does shame do? Shame makes us sick. There's just a heart sickness. And what does it say? Confess your sins one to another that you may be healed.
That's the reason.
Right? Confession brings healing. But you don't just confess to anybody. You confess to those who can extend to you and remind you of not only the relationship between one another, but the relationship we have with God. And I think sometimes we go out and we confess things to people out of guilt or shame or whatever, but they have no power to speak life into us. And we wonder why we keep getting ourselves, but man, when you go to those who you can have relationship and can point you back to healing.
Yeah, and what's amazing is I remember realizing this in youth ministry 20 years ago when those core teens weren't showing up on Wednesday nights. We're staying away. Sometimes it's because it was football season, right, Lee?
That's
and,
right.
But even then, sometimes you came in your pads.
Yeah,
Right?
That is true.
But when they stopped coming, it's usually because they slipped away, and then the last place they wanted to be was at church. It's amazing how many people we listen, the enemy trips us up, he lies to us, and then we fall into the lie, and then he brings this shame that says, now you're not even worthy enough to go to church, to be in that life group, to worship God, to pray with. Don't even pray to God. You've already disappointed. Why would you continue talking? Just carry it like a weight around your neck and let it just drag you everywhere you go. Where no, the truth is, because of that, I should be running to God, running to the community, and then we want to have a community that people can run to.
That's correct.
Right? So we want to create a place where, no, we want to create a safe place, a loving place where you can come. So Lee, I said this to you through a text, but the fact that you can preach a powerful word on a Sunday, but you can say, I feel so safe with all of you that I'm going to share where I'm at, what I'm going through, and realize this is a safe place. Not the courage of just you, but of saying, man, this house is a safe place. That you can do that, and we're not going to think of you, oh, you can't be my minister if you're doing that. No, you're my minister. Or my leaders are going to say, oh, no, I can't now not lead. No, you can lead, because we're doing this together. Jesus, it's amazing how quickly he can restore.
Yeah.
Right? It's amazing. It's like, can you really restore that quickly, Jesus? Yeah, I can. I don't think of Peter running back to fishing. I understand that. Go where it's comfortable, nowhere else to go, but where did Jesus find him? Jesus found him fishing. Mm-hmm. Where was the place where he actually had that moment with God that was the clearest it ever was?
Yeah.
When Jesus said, come follow me, was the greatest clip. So to me, he's going back to where he met Jesus, right to the beginning. And for us, Jesus just says, come, follow me. And I'll deal with your mess. No, don't. Shame, no time for shame, no time for guilt. You're not perfect. That's why you need me, but we're in this together. And I just love that. I love that kingdom life wants. We strive in a good way to create that place to where even leaders can be vulnerable, to where we can be shoulder to shoulder with each other, even as we work through our shame and our guilt together, because God is calling all of us, right?
Yeah.
So,
it's funny. I think what you said about relationships starting with the conversation is just so key. Truth of the matter is, we're talking anyway, right? We're talking. The problem is we're not getting another perspective. It's the same voice. The same, you did it again. How did you do it? I thought you beat this thing. Oh, you just found a new way to do it. Oh, now you found a way to hide it. Now they're gonna find out, right? So we know we're already having the conversation. Now let's open it up. Now, like you said. So I just, Pastor Marco, I think that's just phenomenal. How do we deal with the shame? We have to talk it through and recognize and that's the thing, because when I can talk it through, I realize what I'm ashamed of is not who I am. It's something I did. And when I can separate those things, then I can be okay. That's the beginning of healing, right? Yeah. I did something dumb. I did something whatever. I made a poor choice, but ultimately that's not who I am. That doesn't change my value, my identity, even my purpose. It's something that I did.
Yeah.
So absolutely, have the conversation.
Yeah. And sometimes, depending on what we're going through, sometimes we do need to step back at times, but not because of a bad thing. It's because I need to prioritize X, Y, and Z. I need to find healing. I need to get restoration. So there's no shame in that either. That if I was to come to you guys, be like, man, and you'd be like, you know what? Take a couple weeks. Don't worry about preaching. We'll do this, but take a couple weeks, prioritize your family, prioritize, take time to consecrate and get and find that thing, you have that relationship with your family that you focus on that. Don't worry. That to me is a healthy way to look at it. It's not, oh, you did this, so now you got to step. It's
You're
not
on
a
timeout.
punishment.
Right,
Yeah,
you're on time, right.
It's not any of that. It's like, no, it's
Yeah.
healthy
Sometimes
ways.
you gotta wear a sling.
Sometimes you gotta wear a sling.
And sometimes
and then
it comes
sometimes
out-
you start getting to the place where you're,
But in the right environment where
right
it's safe. You're not doing that in the mall when you're bumping into everybody.
Right.
Yeah. So
All right. Well, that was fantastic.
I know. Like,
Wow.
wow, half an hour. Holy cow.
Holy moly. All right. We're going to move right along, and we're going to go to the following day, which is day 16, and the title was Guilt.
can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
Because we're moving on, and this is still staying in the same line, but for those of us that are really going through this and you need that help, at least if this is your home or even if it isn't, reach out to us.
Please.
Let us
Please.
try to help.
Yeah.
Let us work through that shame. If you say, I don't have a safe person to talk to, you don't know my home and I'm not connected to people in church and I don't have a safe voice, well then, God has you listening to this for a reason. Take the next step, call us. Come on a Sunday, reach out to us, and let's do it. Let's
Absolutely.
be real.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Well, we're going to kick off our next scripture reading, which is found in Matthew chapter 27. And it starts in verse 1. Early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people came to the decision to put Jesus to death. They bound him and led him away and handed him over to Pilate the governor. When Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned the 30 silver coins to the chief priests and the elders. I have sinned, he said, for I have betrayed innocent blood. What is that to us? They replied. That's your responsibility. So Jesus threw the money into the temple and left. And then he went away and he hanged himself.
And so we invite you to ask yourself, how have I experienced God's grace and love even when I have felt most undeserving? So here we are. We talk about Peter, who was close but couldn't get closer. Was in the right area, just couldn't kind of get over a hump. Now we have Judas, who seems to have remorse, seems to realize he's done something wrong, and now he's going back to fix it. What do we see? What sticks out to us here?
Well, I think, just from an observational perspective, that's a big point, right? Mm-hmm. He's trying to fix his problem. I blew it. I got to fix it. Yeah. And so what does he do? He goes back to the people who were complicit in his sin and tries to get, I'm going to, I did this was wrong, we shouldn't have done this, so I want to kind of be out of it. Yeah. I want to get out of this, and it doesn't work. And I think the thing about it that's important is that when Paul talks about it and he says, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and he says the wages of sin is death. What we try to do so often is we try to be our own sacrifice. I'm going to try to fix my sin, but the problem is I can't. There's no way I can fix my sin. The only way that sin can be fixed is for there to be a sacrifice. The Bible is very clear that for sin to be fixed, the sacrifice has to be made. Justice has to be served. So justice requires payment, right? So in a sense, when if I have offended, if I have offended somebody, or let me spin it around this way and say, if somebody has offended me, they've hurt me, right? And then I have a responsibility before the Lord to forgive them. But if I forgive them, if justice has to be served, because that's a principle of the kingdom, but if I forgive them, that means they're off the hook. They're not paying the price for their sin, then somebody has to. And the answer is, I, in essence, pay the price for sin, because what I'm saying is, if I forgive you, and I say I no longer hold that sin over you, I forgive you, I'm now left with this pain because I know what they did, and every time I'm looking at them and remembering that I've forgiven them, what I have to do is now take that and say, Lord, I can't carry the price of this, so I'm asking you to take the weight of this pain off of my shoulders. And so in this sense, what we recognize is that Judas is just trying to fix it, but he doesn't understand that, he understands that a price has to be paid, but because he doesn't have the relationship with Jesus to understand that he's the one that would actually pay the price, he goes and ultimately finds no hope and hangs himself. And in essence, thinks that's how he's fixing the problem.
Yeah.
Because he can't handle the weight of that pain anymore.
Yeah. And I don't know, it's still hard. I have more compassion and understanding for Judas than I think I had in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I mean, it's kind of hard receiving forgiveness when you're the one that puts Jesus to the cross.
Yeah.
Especially when that isn't what
You
you intended or believed or was what you were told.
Yeah.
Jews didn't put Jews to the cross on the Sabbath. There's no way Judas could have ever thought of him setting up a meeting with the Sanhedrin for them to question Jesus would ever lead to him going to the cross and being condemned.
Yeah.
So to me, and I know a lot of people don't like it, whether it's the music, the outfits, or the actual, liberties of the storyline, but I love Jesus Christ Superstar. Don't judge me, okay? And
The John Legend one?
no, not the John.
Okay.
No,
Some of us only know John Legend.
No, you gotta go with the original, okay? But
Okay, go ahead.
but the perspective of Judas in that movie was, I think, one of the ones that opened up Judas as a sympathetic figure to me, and something I've always constantly dealt and wrestled with from year to year, especially at this time of the year. But to think of Judas thinking that he can do the work of God better than God. And how many of us do that all the time? And that's what I see. Jesus, you're not doing this right. You're supposed to be the high priest. You're supposed to be reforming the Sanhedrin, and you need to take it over, and that's the way the Messiah is going to come, and that's what some of the text says that I'm holding on to. So Jesus, let me help you let me show you how you're supposed to be the Messiah.
Yeah.
And let me force this at the same time getting more money for our ministry here. And when he sees that, my way of ministry is not better than your way of ministry. Oh, what I thought was right way to now lead this church, or to run the youth ministry, or to be the priest in my home with my kids and my spouse, or how to be whatever it is for all of us, we realize how easily we can become a Judas in the sense of having a better way to do it, or how easily I can become the big brother. To me, Peter is the little brother, is that prodigal son. Judas is the big brother, the one that's like, no, this is how you're supposed to do it, God. No, this is how you're supposed to make it happen. So with that, like I said, I become more sympathetic, and then the problem is you come back of, now how do we deal with guilt and shame? Can we find forgiveness and forgive ourselves?
Right.
To where Peter did and was restored and now became the rock, right? That the church was built on. Judas was not able to find it, and he ended up letting his own sin and his choices destroy him, right? And that's the choice all of us have. Why do we have to deal with shame and guilt? Because if not, we can walk through the doors of forgiveness and walk through the path that Peter walked, or we can just allow it to just define us and walk through the door of Judas and allow it to kill us. And what do we want to choose? And that's how I break that down and understand why Jesus was like, this is my friend. I love you. And I want to help you through this because I see your heart. You're not evil, but you can't let the evil one control you. And that's, no matter who we are, can happen.
Yeah.
You said a few things that set off all kinds of bells in my head. One of them, isn't it interesting? You can correct me. I think it was John, maybe it was Luke though, where we see at the Last Supper, Jesus vows to pray for Peter because Satan wants
Luke
to sift
22.
him.
Yeah.
How come Satan doesn't want to sift Judas? We look at Judas always being this evil figure, but it's like, but that wasn't even where the enemy was attacking necessarily, right? So that's the one thing. I think the other thing, that you bring up is the idea that, like, absolutely, we've gone this far, and enough. It reminds me of the story early in Jesus' ministry with the lame man that comes in through the roof, right? And so everybody's there, the leaders of the church and government and everybody, and they're there, and they say that Jesus is is a heretic and he's not true or whatever. And so he says, what do you want me to do for you? Obviously the guy's lame. Like, come on, Jesus, not
not a hard one.
not the brightest question here. And the first thing he does is forgive him for a sin, right? And you go, well, that doesn't mean anything. And he goes, oh, you want to see if it's real? All right, well, get up and walk. Right? Which one was harder? And it just reminds me that Judas has now been a part of this ministry where people who have been on the social moral pole so much lower than Judas continues to receive forgiveness. Go and sin no more, he tells the woman, the not the adulterous woman, but the woman that found in adultery. He tells Zacchaeus, we don't even know what he tells Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus comes out and I'm giving everything away, and whatever I have left over, I'm giving that away too. And we see just all of these things and all of these places for people. And I don't know if it's because Judas had this thing hanging over him, right? Sometimes I think that if we don't get caught out in one area, we almost think we can get away with anything, right? So because he's with Jesus for as long as he's with Jesus, and Jesus never mentions the fact that money's missing, hey, Judas, he's like, well, I mean, I guess if you knew so much, God, you would have known I was taken from you. So maybe you're not quite God. I'm testing you. I'm trying to see. And I guess that sometimes we don't realize the grace that we have day to day, that we're not being exposed, the grace that there's still an opportunity, the grace that he's still accessible, the grace that he still keeps you close. He saves you a seat, that there's space for you. And I guess what we say here, and even when we ask this question, how have you experienced God's grace? That's what we want to remind you of. We don't want this to be about, well, how do I know when I'm guilty? It's no. Remember the grace. Remember the time where you walked that aisle, you prayed that prayer, you lifted your hand, you texted believe, whatever that was. And in that moment, if we have to remind ourselves every single day that we are still that person and we are still that worthy. We haven't earned it. We don't have to necessarily expect it, but because we've received it and how God set it up, it's still ours to be a part of and to have.
What's the verdict of our guilt?
Right.
Mercy and grace.
Yeah.
Oh, what do I deserve for my sin? Grace. Are you sure, God? And then that's why we get into our way, because we believe no.
Yeah.
I can't pray, like you were saying last week. I can't pray for Putin because Putin deserves death. Because, did you see they bombed a maternity hospital? Did you see did you see the atrocities? How can you even fathom anything else other than getting what you deserve?
Right.
And that's the heart of Christianity we don't grasp it, but maybe the very thing where God's judgment is you get what you don't deserve.
Right.
And that's called Christianity.
Well, I think the hope in it is found in 1 John 1, 8 and 9, where he says, if we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. But if we'll confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us of our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness.
Yeah.
Not only does he forgive us, but he restores us to who he's called us to be. He takes everything in over in Hebrews, and I'll say it every time I can get in there. Hebrews chapter 10. You know, day after day, the priest put the sacrifices, but when the final sacrifice came, was Jesus Christ, he paid the price for all sin. And he says, and where there is, where the sacrifice has been made, sin he is not remembered. He remembers our sin no more. He doesn't forget it. He chooses to remember it no more. He restores us back to where we're called to be.
Yeah.
Which is huge.
Mm-hmm. And that he wants to restore everybody.
That's right.
Everybody. And that goes to the thing where it's our choice. It's not his choice to not. It's ours. Just like Jude. I mean, C.S. Lewis in The Great Divorce, right?
Oh yeah.
On the bus trip to heaven, there were some people that got off the bus, didn't, because they were like, no, this isn't the way it should be.
Right.
No, God, you're wrong. These people shouldn't be here. How can that person be there? How can, no, like.
I just want my rights. Right?
Yeah, no,
Just
this
give me
is
what
the
I
way
deserve.
it's supposed to be. And that's where it's like, no, he's doing something, and he did something that was so extraordinary that he took everybody's sin at that cross. He took everybody's sin.
Yeah.
He took everybody's sin. Thank you, Jesus, right? He took everybody's sin.
Meditate on that. Mm-hmm. Meditate on that. Well, it's interesting because we start with, when we started today, we started with shame and then we go to guilt. But this last one is very interesting because this last one, we're talking about what we did on day 18, which would have just been yesterday. And, and it's defend. And we're no longer looking at the disciples, but our focus is back on Jesus. So, Pastor Mike, if you wouldn't mind reading.
Sure. We're in, again, Matthew chapter 27.
I do know how to read, okay? Just
yeah, but I have the Bible.
Exactly.
You only have a phone.
The Bible tells me so.
Matthew chapter 27, verse 11 through 14. Meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Yes, it is as you said," Jesus replied. When he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear the testimony they're bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the amazement of the governor.
And so we encourage you to ask yourself, do I trust that God is my eternal defender, or am I consistently trying to vindicate myself? So we go from now, what's going on outside, and it kind of brings our focus back into Jesus, and this is one of the first of many kangaroo courts, so to speak, and trials. But what we notice here is that Jesus does not speak.
Right.
What is that? What is the meaning? What is the observation? What are we to learn from that? Are we supposed to say that Christians, when you get accused, just that's it?
Yeah.
I guess that's it.
Mm-hmm. And I think Jesus does speak. It's just because Pilate asks him a question, he answers.
Yeah.
Right? And then later on, he has a full dialogue with Pilate.
Right.
So it's amazing who Jesus speaks to and who he doesn't speak to.
And what he answers.
doesn't. Yeah, what he answers, what he doesn't answer. Right. What he will commit to having dialogue with, to that in which he's like, there's no point. So that, I think, is the real focus of this. Mm-hmm. If we had time to really, what were the accusations? Right. What are the things they're bringing that he, just doesn't dialogue with? But when Pilate wants to dialogue with him about what is truth, Jesus is like, oh, we could have a conversation now.
Yeah.
Or when Pilate sends him to Herod, Pilate is an actual Roman citizen that was assigned after the death of King Herod, and then long story short, some of the sons died and stuff, so the kingdoms was broken up into the provinces. So some of King Herod, the great son, was over some of the provinces, but other provinces, like Jerusalem where Pilate was, there was Roman officials for one of the first times over literally God's people. Jesus dialogues with the actual person that has no business being in the position he is over God's people, but the one that actually has the inheritance and actually is the rightful king of God's people. Jesus like, I'm not even wasting my time. Yeah. My breath is too important to even waste on you, but I will engage because Jesus sees the hearts of us. So that's why for us, why do we waste our time arguing with people, things that don't go anywhere? I'm so tired of having conversations that are so circular that when it's all said and done, we don't get nowhere, and it's just about people wanting to just share their, misguided opinions, or even rightful opinions, but where our opinions don't matter, because the true solution, Pastor Mike, we can share our opinions. What is God saying in the middle of this? And if we don't get to that or want to get to that, then we just wasted 2 hours talking about children's ministry, because what we need to know is what God is saying. So that to me is kind of like the biggest thing that jumps out of this, and why Jesus doesn't defend himself against a Sadducee, because he knows they've already made plans from the beginning of his ministry. You go to John 2, you saw they made plans 3 years ago to get me to this point, to kill me. So no words I'm going to share here is going to make any difference. Do what but you, Pilate, I can share with you a kingdom. Yeah. And that's why God was moving on Pilate's wife's heart, right? And doing something. Always, where's Pilate now? I don't know that one for sure, but I can't wait. I would love to take a roll call in heaven when I get there, just to know, like,
you might just be shocked.
Who is here?
And to be fair, maybe some people may be shocked to see the three of us there too.
Yeah,
so let's just,
and I'm assuming, Lord God,
I know some people that are shocked that he's a pastor.
Yeah. So, but I'm just saying, like, it's just amazing who God will spend time in conversation with, and who he's like, why waste your time? So, and that goes to, I remember Bishop wanting at times to defend, people's comments on blogs and, online, and just saying this, that, and thing about our church, and like, if I'm going to interface and communicate with people, those aren't the ones. Yep. I want the ones that are truly open, truly seeking, that truly, heart is not hard. The heart isn't hard, but it's open, so.
Well, just,
go ahead,
really quickly, was it Proverbs says, do not answer a fool his folly, right? Whatever. Uh-huh. But what I notice about this is there's two things. Number one, Pontius Pilate asked him about his identity. Are you the king of Jews? Yes, I'm he. What about these charges? He doesn't answer charges.
Yeah.
He only speaks about who he is.
That's good.
Jesus talks about his identity, and that's the thing. Sometimes we're trying to argue positions, but we don't know how to represent the identity of Jesus Christ. And so that's why we end up in trouble. That's why we were laughing about it, right? I'll get it in there every time I can. A.W. Tozer, The Pursuit of God, Chapter 2, The Blessedness of Possessing Nothing. He who defends himself will have himself for his defense, and he will have no other. But let him come defenseless, and have the Lord Almighty for his defense, and he will have no less. If people have already prejudged us as guilty, then now it's up to God to be our defender. And sometimes the tough part, here's the challenge. What happens when you've been falsely accused of something and you're going to be punished of it and you can't do anything about it? How do you respond?
Yeah. Pastor Mike and Pastor Marco, the question that I have, right, is, okay, so Jesus is going to, about the charges, right, or these charges when he sees Herod and all these things. But think about it. if at the end of the day, if it works out exactly the way we think it should work out, then what we're saying is Jesus uses and convinces them of his actual identity, and there's no cross. And there's no cross. Like, that becomes a problem, right? And I think that sometimes we forget that when we hear scripture, like, the end of Genesis, where Joseph tells his brothers, what you meant for evil, God has used for good. When we quote Romans 8:28, and we say, God will work all things, I think we have to recognize that, man, it's sometimes in the lows that God is lifted the highest. Yeah. And so we have to go through these things, and I can't just want to, again, avoid them for my comfort, because there's a message in it, right? I mean, we say it, and I know it's cliche, but somewhere in your mess is a message. Through your test is a testimony. Yep. These are actual things in Christianity and faith, and ultimately our witness is not something we can shortcut. We cannot just convince somebody of the reality of Christ or of my personal salvation, because life is way better at convincing people of what's not than we are of what is.
Absolutely. As I'm thinking about this and hearing, is how Paul, at the end of Acts, you read how Paul escalates his own trial.
Right.
He was actually going to be a freed man, and he's like, no.
I appeal to Caesar.
I want to go to Caesar, right? No. And they're like, but we're about to set you free. But now you want our hands are, court. You're going, and it's funny because it's like, but in this case, him talking brought him to his fate of, basically, to his death. Right. Yeah. So, but at the same time, he needed to be in Rome. Right. God's calling on his life, so he actually had to speak, of course, as a Roman citizen. He had the right to different circumstances, but it's almost like it's not just cut and paste type of thing. We have to be led by God. We need to know who we are. Yeah. Because when we have clarity of who we are and what our purpose is, then the offenses or what these people might think of me, or me defending myself on here, all of this stuff, it don't matter. Yeah. It isn't the driver. It doesn't make a difference. The difference is what God's calling me to. So Jesus knew exactly where he was called to and what he was meant to do in that moment. Paul knew what he was called to, thus making the appeal to Caesar to go, you need to send me to Rome, realizing, and he said, I'm not coming back.
Tell the Ephesians.
Bye-bye, I'm not coming back. This is the last time you're seeing me. Like, give me a good hug. I'm not coming back for a third time here. This is done, because he knew what God was calling him to. And that is where I think when we are unsure of ourselves, when we are insecure is another word, then we're so much quicker to defend. We're so much quicker to try to control the narrative and try to control what people are saying or people are doing. I don't care what people think about Kingdom Life, because I already know who Kingdom Life is. I don't care what people think about Jesus, because I already know I don't care what people think about me, in the sense of, this, that, and the other, whether they're old people from school, or if it's family members. No, because I know. That doesn't mean I'm flippant. Doesn't mean, we're considerate, we're loving, but man, we're not going to be controlled by that narrative that if somebody was to cancel us or cancel me or on social media, I'm not losing my mind.
Yeah. The one thing, and I know you're itching too, but the one thing.
He's going to Acts already.
I'm over in Isaiah.
Oh,
actually.
you went back to Isaiah.
Please. We're going to the antiques.
Yeah, no.
So, but the one thing I would say is, isn't it interesting, to your point, when we know our identity, when we know what we've been told, and we act in it, then I truly have nothing to defend. Mm-hmm. It's when I'm hiding. It's when there's something I don't want you to know. It's when my motives aren't right. Yeah. I may still preach, but I may preach
Yeah.
70% for the people and 30% for me because I like the way it makes me feel, right? And so what you begin to realize is, man, whenever your motives are off, whenever you weren't sent to that part, when you didn't follow the Spirit in that moment, then all of a sudden I have something to defend.
Yeah.
But when God says, I've never had to defend, in the few times I felt the need to go and speak to somebody randomly, I didn't have to defend it because I was like, take it or leave it, that's God.
But think about this. When shame and guilt are controlling us, that we're bound by it or we're dealing with it, that means we are trying to cover it and then we'll defend ourselves.
That's right.
Because we have this agenda we're trying to hide or control because, no, I can't let you know about that. So now I did mess up, but shame isn't controlling it, and now I bring it to the light, I'm not defending it.
I mean, what does Shakespeare say? Methinks thou doth protest too much.
Yeah, so that's why you see Jesus, and he's like, no, and that's where we need to get to as we're so much in a culture that is an uproar for every little thing. We're so sensitive. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a time I love to debate. I love to talk junk.
He does.
Right?
Very much.
And good.
And he's good at it.
Nobody cares if you're doing a lot. If you keep losing, it hurts.
So I love those things, but we have to get the right perspective.
Yeah, that's good.
Right? And go back to the garden. Prayer and the presence of God gives us the right perspective. Jesus had the right perspective. So he knew, say whatever you want. I don't care. Because what I'm about to do is going to change the world.
And, to that end, in Isaiah 53, I love how it says that like a sheep before shears is silent, so he opened not his mouth. Yeah. And thus, God gave him a portion with the great. It was because he was able to remain silent in the face of accusation and go through what he went through. And it goes on from there to talk about what he went through. It culminates with, because of this, God has given him a portion with the great. And he goes on to talk about how he's made him. And I think for me, as I find that the more we can learn to let God be our defender, then the more God can actually speak through our life. The more we try to actually defend ourselves from stuff or make our case or whatever, the less we give God the opportunity to actually speak through us. And I think, man, that's what we got to be.
Yep. Absolutely.
Quick to forgive.
Yeah.
Quick to release. Quick to find our identity in Jesus.
Yeah. Quick to talk, communicate, share with one another.
Confess.
Share our burdens. Confess to one another. Be a safe person. Be a safe people. Bring things, because here's the other thing. What do you have to defend if I'm not accusing you?
Right.
Problem is, as Christians, we're always accusing that people have to defend themselves. But what if we were a type of people where people didn't feel like they had to defend themselves with us? They can just be themselves.
Yeah.
And then allow God,
the
only one that knows how to truly transform and restore, to do his thing.
Yeah.
Because of it,
It's when we lead, right? When we lead like Jesus led with if we lead how Jesus left Judas. Just a friend.
Yeah.
The opportunity to be a friend is why we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
Well, week 4 is in the books.
Another good hour and 5
There you
minutes.
go. There you go. But who's counting?
Amazing.
Who's counting?
It's just amazing. How did it go like that?
Well, again, I hope that you have not only enjoyed this, but you are enjoying this time of consecration. I hope that you are that you are getting out there. I mean, you guys, we are halfway home. And we are believing that it's not going to end on Easter, but we are going to celebrate what God is doing and what he will continue to do. So continue to follow us on social media. Continue to be part of what's going on in the chat beneath. Hey, let us know about some of those other days, other observations, anything that you saw, someone you can share these with. And for those of you just getting started now, listen, there is no special season in the kingdom of God, right? If you come in right now with expectation, willing to be open, willing to learn, willing to be humble, God will meet you where you are. So with that being said, hey, we cannot wait to see you again next week. Have a wonderful week. Have a great night.
God bless.
Deuces.
Thank you for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed our presentation. Would you consider partnering with us to share the hope of God and the love of Jesus by giving? You can give your gift at klcc.us/give. Thank you for your generosity. Also, we would love to connect with you, so please follow, like, and subscribe to all of our social media platforms, as well as downloading our app on both the Apple and Google Play stores. Be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss a thing. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.